Thank you for joining us for the Ward 5 budget consultation session. My name is Lisa Anderson. I will be assisting Councillor El-Chantiry this evening. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. Please remain on mute until you are invited to ask your question. We also ask that you listen to the budget presentation in its entirety before raising your hand to ask a question. Please note this session is being recorded and may be shared by the councillor at his discretion. I will now pass it over to Councillor El-Chantiry, who will introduce staff and provide opening remarks. Please go ahead, Councillor.
Well, thank you very much, Lisa. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening and let us to your home, so to speak. And we normally meet in person, but this time we are in your home on the screen. So thank you very much for taking the time to participate in a very important item in our job, and is the budget. And with this year, many of us, and especially the folks who tune in, they've been receiving updates from our treasurer, and I hope tonight will shed some light on the budget for 2021. So with us tonight, we have the Miss Wendy Stephenson. She has a long title, but we call her the Chief Financial Officer, or the person in charge of all the money in the city. Also, we have with us Jen Nelson, is the acting manager of asset management in the planning, infrastructure, and economic development department. If that's not a mouthful. Jen will be staying with us and will be answering any question comes to her way about infrastructure, future road, bridges, any of this infrastructure question we'll send it to Jen to. But for now, I'd like to turn it over to Wendy to do her presentation, and we'll go from there. Thank you, Lisa. Back to you, Wendy.
Thank you so much, Eli. And I think someone's going to pull my presentation up. So while that's happening, as Eli said, my name is Wendy Stephenson, and I'm the Chief Financial Officer here at the City of Ottawa. And I have oversight of the team that's responsible for pulling together the budget for the city. And tonight, I'm going to give a really short overview of the city's budget, its composition, the budget process, and ways in which you can provide input into that process. You can flip to the next slide, please. So there's an overarching framework for determining how much needs to be collected from taxes to pay for city services. And we can work backwards from a tax target or build up to that number. But really, it's best to start with that tax target to make sure that our budgets remain affordable. And the city has to estimate and determine any increases that we have in expenditures that result from inflation, cost of living increases, or changes to regulations or legislation that impact our expenses, or costs to maintain our assets, or growth to service new neighborhoods, or changes in funding from other levels of government. And something very unique that we're facing in 2021 is the impacts of the city's response to COVID-19. We'll see increased expenses to provide services that are safe and secure to our residents, and decreased revenues as a result of a slower return to some of our city services, so things like transit and our parks and recreation services. We then look at offsetting our pressures or increased costs by savings from efficiencies that can be achieved from our operations. Also look at increases in revenues from our fees that are charged directly to our users for city services. We also include the increased taxes from new assessment that help pay for the increased operating and infrastructure costs that we have to service our new neighborhoods. And basically, if you look at the equation at the bottom left-hand side of the slide, you'll see that our expenditures minus our revenues equal our required taxation for the budget. You can flip to the next slide, please. So this slide shows a total snapshot of our expenditures for 2020 and our overall budget, which was $3.76 billion. And close to 60% of that operating budget is made up of four key service areas: our water and sewer, our police services, our transit, and community and social services. And it's really important to note, and you'll see this on the next slide, that much of the revenue for these services comes from sources other than property tax. So normally user fees or government funding. And our water and sewer is paid solely by revenue from the water bill. and half of our transit operating costs are paid by fare revenue, and over 80% of our community and social services comes from provincial and federal funding. Approximately 9% of our operating budget goes towards capital cash reserves, and that helps us pay for the infrastructure renewal and growth that we see across the city. And the remaining 31% of the budget covers all of our services that are delivered by the city. You can flip to the next slide, please. So in this slide, you'll see that just over 50% of our revenues come from taxes and what we call is payment in lieu of taxes. And that's from other levels of government, so the province and the feds for properties that they own here in the city. And another 19% comes from federal and provincial grants. 25% of our revenue comes from fees and charges, such as our water bill or transit fares and park and recreation fees. You can flip to the next slide, please. So this slide shows a real snapshot of our 2020 capital program, which was $813 million. And the high asset intensive areas are primarily for water and sewer services, transit, and transportation, which includes our roads. 66% of the capital budget for tax supported services is for the renewal or replacement of our aging infrastructure. And on the rate side, so that's water and sewer, 84% of that is for renewal of our assets. And the remainder is really for growth, which is primarily funded by our development charges and other regulatory or strategic initiatives. And things that you don't see on this pie chart are projects that are of strategic importance that are not approved as part of our overall budgeting process and require a separate report or approval from council. So a couple of examples of that are our light rail project or our central library. You can flip to the next slide, please. So here you can see the funding by source. So 68% of our capital funding comes from cash reserves that are put aside as what we term a capital contribution from our operating budget. And the remainder of our capital program is funded by debt, or it has funding from other levels of government and the development charges we collect for construction. You can flip to the next slide, please. So this slide shows really that there's little discretion to reduce spending for many of the city services that we have. Our police budget is tabled separately, and council doesn't have the discretion to make line item changes. They can only approve it or reject it, the budget in its entirety. And budget reductions in other areas like transit or fire or paramedics or roads have to be accompanied by changes in service standards, because those service standards are basically approved by council. And there's also a long list of services or expenditures where there's no discretion. And that's really because these services are legislated or mandated. So things like long-term care, our public health, our housing, and our debt charges. And there's a little more discretion in areas that are funded by fees, where the fees can be increased to recover the cost of delivering that service, or in areas where there's no specific service standard, or for administrative support services. You can flip to the next slide, please. So this slide shows the budget directions that was recently approved by council, and our municipal tax target is set for 3% overall. And that includes an increase to our citywide levy at 2.5%. And the Ottawa Police Services levy is set at 3%. And the reason for the difference between the citywide levy and police services is that police services is responsible for their own capital program. So that really makes up that 0.5 difference that you see between the two. And for transit, the levy set at 4.6%, which includes a $5 million increase to their contribution of capital to replace the counciled provincial gas tax doubling. We are also forecasting additional taxation revenues from growth from assessment, and that's at 1.5%. And our rate programs will increase revenue by 4.8% overall, which is in alignment with our long-range financial plan. And our user fees and charges will increase in accordance with our long-range financial plan or fiscal framework, as well as an incremental COVID-19 cost recovery that's temporary for 2021. And our capital budget is developed in accordance with the direction outlined in our 2019 development charges background study, and of course our long-range financial plan and fiscal framework. You can flip to the next slide, please. So the budget directions were approved by Council on October the 14th, and public consultations are taking place throughout October. All the budgets will be tabled with Council and the various boards and commissions next week, with Council receiving the budget or the draft budget estimates on November the 4th. And basically from that date to December the 8th, the individual budgets for each committee, board, and commission are reviewed. And it's at these meetings that the public has another opportunity to provide feedback and input on the budget via public delegations. And then the budget is approved by the Committee of the Whole and Council on December the 9th. And this year, individual committees have the flexibility to make recommendations to make budget changes that could be funded from reductions in other committee budgets. And final approval of these recommendations will be made on December 9th by Council. You can flip to the next slide, please. So this shows a list of all the budget meetings where public delegations can happen, and you can provide input or recommendations on the budget draft estimates that are tabled at Council. And this list can be found on the city's website, and it's updated if there are any changes that are made to those dates. And you can flip to the next slide. So there's several resources that are available to you and ways that you can provide input into the budget throughout the year. Obviously, tonight is one of those ways that you can provide input, and you can also leverage ottawa.ca, and Engage Ottawa provides a very comprehensive online engagement platform that allows you to connect with the city in an interactive manner. You can also provide input, complete an online survey, or send an email to budget@ottawa, or send any information or questions or suggestions to your councillor. All of your feedback is appreciated, it's reviewed and considered. And I just want to thank you all for your participation in the public meeting today. And I look forward to hearing your priorities and answering any questions that you may have. Thank you very much. I'll now pass it back up to you, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Wendy. Wendy, I thought we had one slideshow, dollar-wise, the increase for rural dwelling versus urban. Do we have that slide available?
You're talking about the property tax increase, Councillor?
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, what does it mean in dollar-wise? For, I believe rural will be $88 and urban $106. Am I correct? Or?
Rural is $88 and the urban is $115.
Oh, 115. Okay. Okay. Okay, so we'll turn it to you, Lisa, for a couple more housekeeping, and we'll go to a Q&A. Lisa?
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Wendy, for your presentation. So we now invite questions from residents. Please use the raise hand function at the top of your screen if you wish to ask a question. Please ask one question and one follow-up question at a time so that everyone has an opportunity to speak. We ask that you remain on mute until you are called upon to ask your question.
So I see a hand. Okay. So Lisa, we already have a few hands up. Maybe if you start with the first one.
Yeah, let's start with Patrick Mullen. Please go ahead, Patrick.
Thank you. I'm curious how this budget would compare with other cities in Ontario of comparable size, specifically, if possible, looking at infrastructure and roads.
Okay, so that's for you, Wendy.
If you're looking at our spending compared to other cities' spending, I can say that I don't have a distinct answer for you. I'm sorry about that. What I can tell you in terms of our tax increases, and we've done some surveys across Ontario and across Canada, and we're very much on the lower end in terms of how we increase our taxes from year to year. If that's something you're interested in, I can certainly see if we have any information and share it with you, Patrick.
Yeah, I'm more curious, like, if possible, how much we're spending per kilometer of road for maintenance compared to other cities and things like that, of that nature. I'm not so sensitive to the percentage of tax increase, but how we're comparing on the spend on the roads.
Jen, maybe you can help us with that answer.
So unfortunately, I don't have those stats handy either. Sorry.
Can we send it to you, Patrick? Would you email my office and we can work with our staff and send you some of those information you're looking for?
Absolutely, we'll do.
All right,
Yep.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mullen. Okay, sorry, Wendy, you have something to add?
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, well, we get an annual study, Patrick, and what I'll do is I'll pull that out and just see if there's anything in there that compares cities across basically Canada and share that back with Eli's office. So we will look into that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next question will be from Phil Sweetnam. Go ahead, Phil.
Phil, you are on a mute. You have to unmute. I'm used to say that to Phil at the MVCA meeting. You need to unmute to Phil.
It should be at the top of the screen there.
Okay, what about if we go to next question and then we'll come back to Phil?
Yeah, Phil, it looks like you're unmuted now. Are you able to?
Okay, yes.
Okay. While he's working on that, perhaps we'll go to Christine as the next question.
Thank you. Thank you so much. My name's Christine McGuire. I'm a proud CARP resident with the Councillor, and I'm also the executive director of the Diefenbunker, Canada's Cold War Museum. Thank you very much for the information. I see in our 2020 budget that 6.5% of the budget was committed to parks, recreation, and culture. So, oh.
Problem solver.
Can you still hear me? Oh, I think Phil unmuted.
Go ahead, Christine.
Yes. Are we looking in terms of the 2021 a stable budget in terms of the park, recreation, and culture, and then also under the rural affairs, which I know Councillor El-Chantiry heads, because as we know, we're kind of all going through this very unprecedented time and financial pressures, and especially for culture and museums, they've been particularly hard hit. So just wanting to hear your thoughts and direction in terms of the budget allocation for culture.
Do you want me to take that, Eli?
Sure, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Christine, for your question. It's a very good question, and our investments in the community and all of those that support the community are extremely important, and that's something that we're not looking to make any changes to. So you should see that remain stable into 2021.
Great, thank you very much.
And just for Christine's benefit, Christine been working very closely with our elected official on other level of government, provincially and federally, and she's done a great job, tried to maintain her staff for the bunker and also follow the rules and the guideline after COVID. So I just want to say thank you, Christine, doing a great job, balancing between your staff and between the budget pressure you are facing with, and pleasure working with you because you're always a pleasant and know what to ask for. So always make it easy.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the City of Ottawa's support and Councillor El-Chantiry for continuing to be a really important advocate.
Thank you. Lisa, I see Phil back on.
Yeah, Phil, did you want to go ahead and ask your question now?
Yes, can you hear me there now?
Yes, very well, Phil.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to always be sure that we wound up with an affordable city to run, and I was pleased to see that Ottawa took some direction towards dealing with climate change. What was a bit concerning when I've seen figures from $30 billion to $50 billion is the cost of dealing with that. And I wonder if council has given any direction to say, we're not going to go ahead with projects unless we get a certain percentage from other levels of government, because I don't think we can manage 50 billion on our own over the next 30 years, or even 30 billion over the next years, the 30 years to achieve the zero carbon.
Well, that's a good question, Phil, and thank you for that, because I believe this was debated quite a bit on council, and quite honestly, it is more misunderstood than what is real. What we would ask, or what the committee, the environmental committee, they introduce a plan, and we have to have a plan to move forward. But with that plan, any item, and Wendy can correct me because she's the one who's monitoring the money, any item come to committee or council before, if we don't have the sufficient funding from other level of government, council is not committed to follow. And I believe we have to have the commitment from other level of government first to be able to move forward. So, but without the plan, you can't ask for them because we have no plan. So we have a plan in place, and our plan been costed for the next 30 years or so. But now if there's no other level of government contribute to that plan, so that obviously won't go very far. And I'll turn it to Wendy if she can explain it a little bit better, please, Wendy.
Sure. I think just to add to that, Eli, the plan includes contributions from, I think it was sort of 4 envelopes or 4 buckets. So we were looking at senior levels of government, the federal government, the province, also what I call a community contribution, in the sense that there's things that businesses and private individuals can do to reduce carbon emissions and contribute to our overall outcome, as well as the city's contribution. So it's really 4 levers that flow into that. And you're absolutely correct, Eli. Council, each project will come to council in terms of going through that approval process and identifying that funding. So what we're doing from a financial perspective is we're going to look at our long-range financial plan and then carve out some money to make sure, you know, the city can afford our portion of it, or the projects that will come forward. So we're not going to be responsible for the $57 billion. There's a, you know, a much smaller piece of that of which we're going to have to contribute to. And that will really flow into our long range financial plans as we move forward into the future.
Thank you.
And Phil, if I just add something, and some item the city is doing also can save us money. So the LD lighting, the city they took on. I know, you know, we spend some money, but the saving is 3 or 4 times greater than what we invest to make the changes of the LD. So some of these programs, and I know you and I, we both sit an MVCA, you make some investment, but that investment can also reduce cost in the future. And the LD lighting is a great example in our city. The reduction in lighting and in electricity is 3 times or 4 times greater than our investment.
I have sent you a note setting that out in writing. What I summarized with is to say, be sure at the end of the day you leave an affordable city. I'd rather get to 85% reduction than to zero carbon output and have a city that's affordable. You know, things like electric cars are great, but they're very expensive way of getting rid of carbon emission. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you very much, Phil. Lisa?
Thank you, Phil. So our next question will be from Kim. Please go ahead, Kim.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Hear you.
Okay, great. Thanks for this opportunity. So my name is Kim and I live in Carp. I'm a relatively recent Carp resident, having just moved, say, 3 years ago from Canada. So I'm an ex-urbanite. And what I'm experiencing are, for me, some of the priorities may tag on to that last question, but at a lower level, resident level. And that is things that are where we could use help or support or incentives to deal with some of the environmental actions that are seem to be more rural based. And the examples would be some existing programs around forestry and tree planting. I wonder if we could get more emphasis on tree planting along some of our waterways and our creeks and our rivers here in this ward. Because when we're out there, I'm noticing there's farmland right up to the water. So that's an existing program. And another one might be support for removing ash trees. We know there is a program out there, but it's really intended for 1 or 2 if you live in Canada. And some of the rural properties out here have much larger volume or number of trees. Things like dealing with contamination or decommissioning of a well, for example. I came across that and went to the city to look for some assistance, some support, and discovered I had missed a deadline and there was no new funding available. So, Councillor, really all I'm doing is suggesting that there are some areas that I think you do a great job at, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are for some of the priorities, existing programs or new things that we could do for 2021.
Well, I mean, those are some good idea, Kim, first of all, and welcome to CARP if you're new. And I live in Canada before, so I moved to CARP 7 years ago. When you talk about tree programming, so we've done quite a bit actually, and recently we had a program since the tornadoes hit us in Dunrobin in 2018. We have worked with the federal government. We managed to get some funding. Some of it we matched a little bit. Some of it was totally pre bono from the federal government. Now there's always, as you know, we lost quite a bit of trees during the tornadoes, and there's a lot we can do or more we can do. But there is some program, and we support them, and we work with staff on them. Even now, we heard that developer wants to give away trees to subdivision, but the subdivision don't want them. They asked me. There are a total of 91 trees, and they have to go on public spaces. So we're always looking for those ideas and program. If the Fed or the provincial government have any program about tree plantation, because as you said, it's very important to us in the rural area, and those trees we lost in the tornadoes is going to take us a long time to recover what we lost there. I'm not sure, Wendy or Jen, if you have something more, but Kim, if you have any ideas you'd like to share with me, you can send me an email and I can follow up with the forestry staff, and I can assure you there's a long list of stuff we do and some program available, whether the commissioning of an old well or ash trees or something like this. So if you email us, perhaps we can direct you to the right staff and they can help you with some of the process. I'm not sure if Jen or Wendy have something to add to this. Wendy's not in the trees. Wendy's only in the money.
No, I don't have anything to add.
That's great.
I'm
Thank
not
you.
Trees either. Sorry.
Okay, but Kim, the best thing, send me an email to my office, please, with some of your questions. The reason I give compliment to Christine McGuire earlier from the different bunker, because she's always follow what's available, what program federally, provincially, municipally, and she seems always find a way to work with those government agency to get what's best for her bunker. So I hope we can do the same.
Excellent. Thank you. That's great. Thank you.
Lisa?
So our next question will be from Bruce. Please go ahead, Bruce.
Hi, hopefully you can hear me. Thank you for taking this call. My question is related to safety in West Carleton area. Councillor El-Chantiry has been very helpful with the 2017 and 2019 floods. There is a possibility at some point in the future for future floods, and that's a safety issue. The key issue that I can see, or the key way to mitigate for floods, is to have the roads in the West Carleton area raised. And I mean, we've been waiting to hear, any updates on, in the budget regarding that work taking place. So I'm going to pass it back to you, someone in your group, to respond to that, please.
Well, I'll start and then I'll turn it over to Jen. As you know, Mr. Collier, I spoke with you before, and I'm the one who requested staff after 2019 flood to do engineering for our roads, especially the one they were underwater for such a long time. Where you live in Wallula Beach area, Moore's Head was underwater, Bayview Drive in Constance Bay, Armitage in Dunrobin, and Vidon Acre in the Lighthouse Lane in Vidon Acre. So those roads, we had our staff, our engineer visit those areas. They did say the roads are safe, but it's compromised because of the floods and the long time they were underwater. And they estimated cost to raise those roads because one of the roads, and actually where you are, is deemed by is inaccessible road during the flood of 2019. Yes. So when we asked the province, and I believe our staff did the study for them, I think it was $3.7 or $3.6 million to raise those roads I just mentioned. And we sent a letter to the Minister Minister Yakobaski, the Minister National Resource and Forestry, and he sent it to Steve Clark, which is the Minister of Municipal Affairs, and we received, basically a response saying, well, because of the pandemic, we will not be assessing or helping out at this time, because the letter went in early in the year, but it took some time to answer it, and by the time we get the answer, COVID has started in March, and since then the answer was no, there's no funding. Now our staff did the study, and I am hoping the study still be valid for some times. If stimulus program or funding come from the province, matching dollar from the Fed and the province and the city, whatever, anything comes available, our study is ready to roll. And Jan, she's the head of that department. I'm going to turn it to her if she can add some more to this, or basically she might repeat what I said. Jen?
Yeah. Yeah, so I totally agree with what the councillor has said, and I do recall that letter going. We have limited budgets that we have to spread across needs across the entire city. So we do our best to address road needs as much as possible in all the areas, including the rural area. And Ward 5 does get a good portion of the budget, largely because they do have a lot of roads. In this particular case, we also have to consider and work closely with the conservation authorities, because the roads I believe that you're speaking about are within that 100-year flood line. So we have to work closely with the conservation authorities to ensure that what we're doing is appropriate and in alignment with what they require as well. So, and to what Councillor El-Chantiry was saying, we have proactively collected a list of needs across the city and different ideas, so that if a stimulus program comes forward, we're ready to go and make those applications. So as a city, we are trying to be very proactive and getting ready so that we can get as much money as possible from those upper tier governments.
I guess my follow-up would be this is not just a regular road issue. This is a safety issue. The safety of residents in West Carleton are being impacted by not having this work done. So I guess my question would be, what committee would I speak to at one of these future committee meetings that you're talking about?
Well, I believe transportation will be one of them, the Committee of Transportation, and also Bruce FEDCO, which is the Financial Economic Development. They deal with funding. Okay. So that would be good. And Bruce, another thing you can help us with, and I know you have a few of your neighbors are have the same concern. To the benefit of the people who's listening, don't know the road is a dead end road and end up on the river. And during the floods, there was so much underwater, only certain vehicle can access those roads. So that's why evacuation was called from a few of the residents in that, but thank God we didn't have to go that far. But he is right. Even MVCA today, they consider this road deemed to be unsafe in 110 years flood, Jan. So they recognize it, because right now when somebody wants to build something in that area, they remind them this road need to be risen certain way before we allow more building on. So that's a valid point, and believe me, if something you can help us by calling on your MPP and your MP and encourage for a stimulus. Like what I said to you, our staff, especially Jen's department, the engineers, they did a very due diligence on it. They did a pore sampling. They worked with the MVCA. They did the measurement for the 110 years of flood. They estimated the cost. All that we have it, and we submitted to the provincial government, because they told us how could we help the city to mitigate the floods. Unfortunately, when we send it, like I said, it seems that COVID took priority over our letter, and we're back to zero. But if you can help us by calling on your other level of government, please, we can use all the help we can get.
Yeah, I've just delayed doing that because of COVID. It has slowed that portion down. And I'll just re-emphasize to everyone who's from the city that's listening about this. This is a safety issue. We had pregnant women on the road who were unable to have, ambulances, fire department, police department come to our, the various houses along the road, just because the road is not high enough. And certain sections of it are high enough, other sections are not. So that's I'll leave it there and pass it along to someone else. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce.
Our next question will be from Neil Falls. Go ahead, Neil.
Thank you. And thanks for the opportunity there, Councillor. Just a quick question about infrastructure. I see that through the budget presentation that all the numbers are going to stay the same, which is nice. I have heard rumors through the grapevine that some projects might be altered due to some deaths in the city there because of COVID, which is understandable. But we're still pushing forward in the village of Carp with development ideas and propositions for expansion of the number of residences in town. With the idea of the town still growing, and with the understanding that things can move around because of budgetary constrictions, is the infrastructure spending going to increase in our vicinity here over the next few years as more construction comes and more developments come to our area? And is there a plan or a forum for redevelopment of the village in the foreseeable future?
Jack?
So my group leads the renewal of existing infrastructure. So we focus on renewing like for like. We also have colleagues in the Recreation Cultural Facilities Department, and they will look towards upgrading things. I don't know what their plans are for Carp. Thirdly, you spoke about the kind of the village feel, and I'm guessing that's along the main drag, like along the Carp Road, as well as I think it's Thomas A. Dolan, the one that goes crossways.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we do have a group called Right of Way Heritage and Urban Design, and they tend to focus on public realm projects. So if you have ideas or things that you want considered specific in regard to that public realm, I think it would be important to engage with that group, because that is part of their mandate. I know they've done that. They do look at things like the Byward Market, main streets in various areas of the city, and the two areas you're talking about in Carp are obviously very important for the look and feel of the village, especially as it is growing. So they would be best positioned to respond to those needs.
Great. And sort of just to follow up to that, the plan for redevelopment of those, is there a plan in place to initiate, should stimulus come, or should the time come that that the budget loosens up and we can get that done, or is that all still in the planning phase and we're waiting for more construction to be completed before going ahead and redoing some of those roadways?
Okay, so just to clarify, are you talking about the roadway itself, or are you talking about like the main street sort of look and feel?
The two main intersecting streets of the village, right? They are in need of repair. I think that goes without saying. Yeah. And I was just wondering if it is, the plan in the foreseeable future to go ahead and revamp all that, or is it just?
Okay, so from a straight up infrastructure perspective, we're going to be resurfacing Thomas A. Dolan in 2021 is in the draft budget. So from Dunrobin Road to 6th Line Road.
All right.
So that should help with at least the surface. But when we do our infrastructure program, it is, for lack of a better word, like for like. If you're talking about improvement to that public realm, typically that public realm group will have planning exercises that they do to figure out what is required and what would be needed to sort of beautify and enhance the experience of the street. I don't know what plans may be in place for CARP.
Perfect, thank you.
But Jen, if we can build on what Neil was saying, also we have met with your group about Donald B. Monroe. As you know, Donald B. Monroe, the subdivision coming toward basically to Dhaka. I think you drove it, and I drove it with Doug Rothwell. And this year we managed to do the sidewalk was missing from to be done. So we did the curb, the sidewalk. And I'm not sure if we're going to be able to push it for 21 or 22, but that road is really in, I don't have to tell you, but it's in bad shape. I have to agree with Neil.
Yeah.
I think you drove it and you saw, we did some repair on it now, but obviously it needs to be resurfaced.
Yeah, and you know what? That's my bad. I'm sorry. I constantly confuse Donald B. Monroe and Thomas A. Dolan.
Yeah.
Tommy Dolan Parkway is a beautiful road, but it's nowhere near the village.
I am so sorry. The kicker is I drive up there to go get ice cream, but I can follow it. I can picture it. I just can't remember the name. Anyways, Donald B. we're looking at 4 to 7 years, unfortunately, for that one.
So that's one.
And Carp Road is the same in the 4 to 7 year range.
No worries.
Sorry.
So Donald B. Monroe, we might have to, if anything, we might have to push to get a section of it, which is the worst section, to be sooner than 2 or 3 years, because really is in bad shape. But anyway, that's why we're here tonight, so you can hear our request. But I have to echo what Neil is saying about that road is as a feature in the main of the village is really embarrassing, that road. So, but anyway, we agree with you, Neil.
Okay, thank you.
But maybe we can ask you, since you work for a large construction company, if you can reduce the cost of asphalt, so maybe we can do more roads, Neil. And if you can reduce the cost a little bit, that would be great. So we can do more mileage than less.
I'll fix it. I'll put you on a payment plan. How's that?
All right.
Talk to Wendy.
No problem.
Thank you. Go ahead, Lisa. Lisa, you have to unmute yourself. You muted yourself.
Sorry about that. Our next question will be from Ken. Please go ahead, Ken.
Are we audited?
You're squeaking for some reason, your microphone. Go ahead, Ken.
I'll turn my camera. Okay, good evening, Eli. I certainly would like to echo Neil's comments about the condition of Donald B. Monroe. I mean, that is one terrible road.
Yes.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, but there's a squeak coming with your voice. I don't know why, but go ahead.
Okay, that's my hearing aid giving me feedback, and I need my hearing aid.
Okay, that's no
Sorry
problem.
about that.
No problem.
Sorry about that. I missed the early part of the presentation because I was having problems with the audio. I hope my question is appropriate. I'll keep it short, and of course it has to do with the funding of road maintenance. I'll send you a more detailed email, but specifically the FEDCO meeting that dealt with the budget guidance for budget 2021 directed that somewhere near $57 million of one-time increase in the federal tax revenue. They directed that be allocated towards addressing the infrastructure renewal. Can you give us any idea at this time what percentage of that 57 million might be directed towards roads renewal in general, not specifically in Ward 5, but we know that we're underfunding by tens of millions, and I'm hoping that a significant portion of that 57 million will get us heading in the right direction to overcome the long-standing deficit in road maintenance. So the simple question is, do we know what percentage of that 57 million might be available for roads renewal?
So I hope I'm going to answer your question here, Ken, and it's a bit of a convoluted answer. So I'm just going to apologize in advance.
I can handle that.
But it's easier. I think it's easier for me to explain it this way. So I want to say a number of years ago, probably two, council increased our overall property taxes. They were generally set at 2%, and they increased it by 1%. And that 1% was directly to deal with closing that infrastructure gap. So that created a pool of, I want to say, approximately almost $10 million, $9.8 million, that would be directed to filling that infrastructure gap, which I believe was identified at that time as $70 million. And so if we look at what that plan is doing, so we're continuing to put money into those renewal investments. And my understanding is over a period of time, with the changes, you're talking about the doubling of the gas tax, I believe, which didn't happen, but we've taken our $57 million of federal gas tax to be able to leverage some of these investments. And what's happening is our investment over the next 7 to 10 years is actually going to grow from 98 million to, I want to say, $113 million. So we're putting that back into those investments. And then as you know, the renewal budget, I'm going to say, fluctuates from year to year. It's not exactly the same. But when I spoke in my presentation, I believe the percentage that I spoke to was approximately, from a tax perspective, I think it's 66% goes to renewal activities, so infrastructure activities. So does that help you? Does that answer your question?
Not really. I guess underlying my basic question is that I don't think the city, both staff and council, really appreciate the magnitude of the backlog of road maintenance and the continuing increase in the annual deficit. I think an indication of that failure to understand the magnitude of the problem was made apparent back in Financial Plan 2017, where the deficiency of $70 million in infrastructure maintenance didn't come out until basically the discussion period. So the fundamental long-range financial planning document was from the start short 70 million, of which some 35 is roads maintenance. So what is it going to take to sort of a get well program that fully illustrates how much money is required to properly maintain our roads? And not just a need like 1.5% of the value or 2% of the value, because we've been underfunding our roads for the better part of 20 years. So there's not only the backlog, but there's the consequence of the roads not having been maintained in a timely manner. And the penalty of not maintaining them in a timely manner is acknowledged as being 4 to 5 times what it would cost had we maintained them as routine maintenance in a timely manner. So there are all sorts of long-term problems that need to be dealt with that I don't have the confidence that we've put together any sort of get well program. And the consequence is that we are sort of encouraged to feel good that there's this 9.8 million that's been added and spread out over 5 years. But our real needs are not an additional 9 million a year. There are 25 and 35 more millions of dollars per year. And unless we address that head on, we just keep pushing the bow wave of that accumulated maintenance deficit ahead of us. And the bow wave is just going to get larger and larger. But I do bang on.
Jen wants to answer that, but before I turn it to Jen, Mr. Holm, you know, this is fundamental today. We've been talking about this for a number of years, and we agree with you. The investment in road is always falling short. But I mean, I said it one time in a letter to the editor, at what cost can we catch up? Can we raise taxes to 7 and 8% so when people lose their home and they can't afford to stay home, or we have to do our best to maintain this? You remember in 2012 when we saw the borrowing very low interest rate, we went to the mayor at the time and we borrowed, I think, Jen, over $100 million at the time because it was a matching dollar from other government, and we tried to close that gap. And we're still, you're right, we're making 10 million addition, but the increase in material, the increase in staffing, the increase in other things is making that gap also is hard to fill. But I'll turn it to Jen, maybe she can add some more. But if you have any question, specific, maybe, you know, like you can send it to us. We'll be happy to respond to you, Ken, before the budget. So Jen?
Okay, so I'm not going to give you a numbers answer. What I am going to offer is the city has a comprehensive asset management program. And through that program, we're building a number of different elements towards continually improving our asset management systems, practices, and approaches. The next big step that we are taking is the Transportation Asset Management Plan, which is one of the 4 core asset management plans that are required by the province by the OREG 588-17 by mid-year of 2021. And so what an asset management plan endeavors to do is to look at the entire portfolio of assets and consider all aspects around it. So in our case, we're gearing it towards services. So in this case, transportation services. So it'll be more than just roads. It's about how people get around outside of the transit system. So it'll include the structures that the roads go over. It'll include the roads themselves, sidewalks, multi-use pathways, and so on. What it considers is not just the renewal. It considers the financial costs. It considers different asset management strategies. There's different approaches to the way that we can manage our infrastructure with varying costs. So as Councillor El-Chantiry said, at what cost? So we can do different things, but at what cost? So in the next rendition being 2024, we'll be looking to identify a target level of service, which is where we line up the financing as well as what level of service we can achieve with that level of investment to kind of balance those two things and bring them well into alignment. So those are the things that we are doing to help provide better analysis. We're also working very closely with Ms. Stephenson's team to ensure that the next long-range financial plan is well aligned to that transportation asset management plan. And we're also connected very closely with the transportation master plan, which covers the growth pieces. So it should provide a good overall view, and it also incorporates operations and maintenance costs. Because sometimes, for example, if you don't renew quickly enough, then the number of potholes that need to be filled increases, and it makes it more expensive, as you were saying, in the long run. So it will consider all aspects of how we're taking care of our assets.
Thank you, Jen.
Yeah, if I could just do Eli, you had a comment?
No, go ahead. We want to go to the next question, but do you have a follow-up, Ken?
Just going to say, I fully agree that the solution to the road maintenance, the road condition problem is not in the annual budget toing and froing. It's in the long range plan, and the need, hopefully, when the plan comes out for discussion in 2021, I'm hoping that there will be included some realistic options. And the option is not always to increase the annual budget. It's to look at different ways, as Jen was saying, to approach the problem, and perhaps also the need to review priorities and to fully understand the penalties that are associated with not the funding of our maintenance. I mean, we've got $12 billion of infrastructure that's sitting out there, deteriorating in many cases, like Thomas Dolan. But I will continue to put hope in the long-range financial plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Lisa?
So we have a question from John. Please go ahead, John.
Thank you, Lisa. Councillor El-Chantiry, thank you for the opportunity to comment and the presentation. John Shank, representing the board from the National Capital Heavy Construction Association. I think Ken's kind of nailed down quite a few of the points that I was hoping to bring up, but I just wanted to sort of reiterate the importance of not only maintaining capital, but increasing for civil heavy construction projects, and just reinforcing that the projects we deliver are essential and a significant economic driver. Wondering if there's any plan, or if Ward 5 is prepared, should there be federal stimulus or provincial stimulus money provided for infrastructure, if we're prepared to act on that. Thank you.
Well, maybe you should ask me first, John, what keeps you up at night. I think that's one of the, because I don't know if you were early on a discussion with Mr. Collier from Wallula Beach area, and we talked about our list. I think we were the first out of the gate to submit our list to the provincial government, and our staff has always been prepared, shovel-ready program. If stimulus ever come to us, whether provincially or federally, but we definitely ready to go, and we have quite a better list. I bet you, Jan, she has a longer list than I do, but West Carleton being the largest ward in the city with 805 kilometers of road, I can tell you, I think we can consume half the stimulus just in West Carleton alone, but I'm not sure how much more Jan can add to this, but I can assure you we do have a list, whether Park and Recreation have a list, infrastructure have a list, most of our departmental have a list of stimulus, because we don't know with what condition this funding will come to us. Jen, if you want to add some more to this.
Exactly. We have a very long and broad list, and yes, it considers infrastructure projects. It considers other things too, because as Councillor El-Chantiry said, we want to be prepared for whatever the federal and provincial government throw at us. In terms, if they're willing to cough up money, we want to be able to grab that money. We have been working very closely with the National Capital Heavy Construction Association. I believe we have monthly meetings with them, and I attend those meetings and provide updates to that group on a regular basis about where we're at with our planning for stimulus, or, well, we don't know that stimulus is coming, but planning in the hopes of stimulus, as well as our progress in terms of developing the capital budget. So we have been very transparent with NCHCA about what we've been doing to help support the heavy construction industry. And we fully agree that it's a huge economic driver in terms of keeping people employed, improving our infrastructure, and the other economic benefits it brings.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you, John. Thank you for Lisa. Before we go to, I see Patrick and Phil have their hand back on. We just received information. Kim, are you still on the meeting with us, Kim, from CARP, my neighbor?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. So we just got this information from Phil, actually. It says the Rideau Valley has a tree planting program for large planting area at cost 15 cents per trees for minimum 1,000 tree. And South Nation Conservation Authority has a program, 50% of ash tree replacement costs up to 500 per tree subsidized program, works very well in my experience. And that's from Phil Sweetnam to answer some of your question. But if you have more questions for us, please email my office tomorrow and we'll follow up with you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Go ahead, Lisa. Maybe you got Mr. Bill Burden hasn't asked any question. Yes, we'll go to Bill first.
Yeah, if you don't mind, we'll go to Bill and then we can start with our second round questions as we have about a half an hour left.
Good evening. I was just wondering what in the budget is there to increase the movement or the growth in the outside rural areas like the Kinburns, the Glettas, the Corkeries, the places that outside that will help them grow, because the growth mainly is in the Carp areas yet.
So the question, Mr. Burden, if there is what? If there's funding or if there's a program, or what are you really looking for? Because if you ask the community, every time we have a plan of subdivision, we see the largest resistance. Nobody wants to see development in their area. So I'm not sure what's your question.
I guess the concerns I have, for instance, Kinburn in itself it loses its bank this year. They'd lost the school. Basically, these smaller areas are dying, and I was wondering, is there anything in the budget to help promote growth in these areas?
Well, I honestly, I don't believe there's in a budget like the Kinburn Bank. You're right, they are closing down next year, but I don't think that has, other than a lot of people doing banking online these days. I met with the bank more than once, spoke with them, and that decision was made before even COVID. You're right, development in Galata or in Kinburn, we haven't seen much progress going. Constance Bay, Dunrobin, Carp, Corkery, yes, we're seeing quite a bit of growth, but if there's something in the budget, I don't believe that. But what we need to do though, Bill, we need to work with, and I think our general manager, Steve Willis, when him and we met with our ministers in the provincial government at the Roma meeting, what we need to changes to some of the regulation. Like now we have a new technology can help purify the water, so area like Kinburn and Galata or Dunrobin to some degree can benefit from that technology. Unfortunately, the act, which is we have to follow, is still from the mid-90s and has not been changed yet. This new government, they promised to revisit it, but obviously they haven't had the time because of COVID to revisit some. But I mean, is the city itself have some? No, the city, unfortunately, we can barely keep up with what we have, but to invest to promote some villages, I think the best way we can promote it if we allow development in it, and instead of the water be acceptable from the well, could be acceptable from the tap, and that would change a whole lot of things. Then those areas will see development. And you and I, we talk about this many times, and I haven't forget about it, but I'm hoping with this government in place, they might revisit those regulations D55 and D54, which is deal with the wastewater. I think. But as far as the budget, I can assure you, I don't think there's funding in the budget for those areas, other than we love those community. And if you ask the people who live in it, they love them the way they are. So come visit us, but go home at night. That's what.
No, and I agree with you 100%. The water is certainly a concern, and it really inhibits the development. But certainly the communities, if they don't grow, they die.
Well, I agree, but I mean, now we start seeing some movement in Fitzroy. We saw some We have a new plan of subdivision for CARP. So we see some development happening, but at the same time, we want to maintain our rural presence in the village, and we don't want to turn it to be a subdivision area. So we try to create that sweet spot. And that's a good question, Bill. Thank you very much. So Lisa, back to you.
Patrick, you can go ahead with your second question.
Thank you. One question, one comment. When we're looking at the cost of infrastructure, I think you need to look at the totality of the cost on the citizens of poor infrastructure. So I can speak to this myself in terms of bent rims and ball joints, and I know numerous neighbors the same thing. So if you ask somebody, would they like a special levy, or do they want to have unplanned trips to their mechanic, which is a serious interruption to your life, I'm sure they'd say, yeah, I'd rather give the money to the city on a special levy than have to say, uh-oh, I was going to do something tomorrow, but now I have to go to the mechanic and I don't have a car, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to look at the totality of the cost, just not what's in the city's budget. And then that would extend to property values, quite frankly. When some of the roads degrade so quickly, prospective buyers going to go, hey, like the house, not going to put up with that road. Let's move on to the next property. So strongly encourage you, look at the whole cost, not just your own budget. Second thing, being pragmatic, on the other hand, there's many roads that are substandard, but they're not consistently substandard. If you look at a road and graded it from an alphabetic scale, some might be a B, C, D, other parts are an F. If you were a little more pragmatic and repaired the really bad sections, you might buy yourself some time, in other words, instead of saying, hey, I'm going to redo this whole 10-kilometer, 5-kilometer strip, or say, I'm going to repair this 200-meter strip. I know that's not the same from a cost perspective as bringing in the crews, but I can tell you on Marchhurst, the crew's there every month, if not more often, filling the same potholes on top of potholes on top of potholes. So there's a literally recurring cost. I mean, they're there a lot on Marchhurst. Like, it's ridiculous if you come from another city like I do to see that potholes repaired that often. So if you repair short sections by yourself, we get all these, funding figured out. But don't forget, the cost is still being incurred. It's just being pushed onto the citizens, into their car damage. My mechanic told me this damage is most likely due to a pothole. Obviously, can't say explicitly that the case, but so I'd rather give you the money than give it to my mechanic. No offense to my mechanic, lovely man, but.
And before we send it to Jen, next time when I go campaigning, I'm going to take you with me, Patrick, and I want you to say that to the resident. Please give us more money for taxes than fixing your car, and I want to see how many people will agree to that. So taxes is very difficult, I have to tell you. This term of council, we met with the mayor beforehand, and when we talk about this, and we insist 1% of the tax collector will be for infrastructure and to catch up with the gap we have in our long-range financial plan. But again, Patrick, we have to find what people can afford to and how much we can charge taxes. You might be comfortable paying a little bit more, but I have to tell you, though, there are some residents, because the increase in property value, which is impact, will increase their taxes, whether they like it or not. So that it's creating a burden. And if you are a senior and you only get the $2 increase on your annual last year, you will be hard pressed to say to me, well, charge me more taxes. So we have to create that balance. And like what I said, maybe it's not the perfect balance, but it is a balance where the majority of the resident, when I went door to door, said to me, increase, but instead of 2%, go to 3% and make that investment in our infrastructure. And that's what we did. And that's what majority, the councillors you see around the table, they ran their campaign that way, including our mayor.
So let me just respond to that. My daughter helped campaign for our local MP in the last election. And she said almost every house she went to, and they asked them, they said, what's your important issues? They said roads. And every time she would have to explain, roads not our jurisdiction. So yes, I know nobody's going to stick up their hand and say, yeah, I want to pay more money. But I do know of a lot of people who say, yeah, if it's going to mean I don't have damage to my car, they will. So yeah, everyone always plays poor. That's never going to change. Whether they're wealthy or poor, they're always going to complain poor when it comes to property taxes. That'll never change.
Thank you. It's a great comment, and we'll take it. So Thank you. And if you have something really, Patrick, you like to share with an email to my office, I sit on 7 of those committees. You heard from Wendy earlier, believe it or not. So I'm on all major committees, so I'll be happy to bring some of your thought on it.
Okay.
Lisa, next person.
Our next question will be from Phil. You can go ahead, Phil.
I just want to endorse the idea that Eli and several members have mentioned. The province really needs to change that D55 standard. I was on a committee, and the real stymieing point wasn't agreement among the engineers or practical people. It was among that MOE just didn't see it as a priority, and they're really not taking into account things like reverse osmosis. So it's something I'd be prepared to spend some more time on, and it doesn't affect me directly. The second thing I wanted to say was, I know when there's 805 kilometers, you'll never get enough money for roads, but Eli probably is too modest before staff in saying that you've got a pretty fair chunk of the budget for roads in the past, and generally I applaud that. So I think that's all I really wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken, you can go ahead.
Okay, am I on?
Yes, you are.
You can. Okay, I'd just like to reinforce the previous comment about the increased cost of repair and maintenance to automobiles as a result of poor road conditions. I think that's an extremely valuable component of any argument for the city to spend more money on road maintenance. Several of the North American transportation automotive associations estimate that with roads in the general condition that we have here in Ottawa, that results in increased maintenance and repair costs totaling about $300 a year per automobile. So when we're arguing the different options as to how we fund the long-range improvement, somehow I think that component needs to be built in. So it's far too easy for people at the door to say, no, I don't want to pay $10 more per year in my taxes. But if that can somehow significantly reduce the $300 that they're having to pay for maintenance, it would be well worth their investment. So I do think that's an important part of any argument to convince people that we need to invest more in our roads in order to avoid those maintenance costs. So I just wanted to reinforce that point with some numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you very much. I don't see any question on my list. Do you see any more question on yours?
No, no more hands raised.
So if we have no other question, I'd like to begin by saying thank you to Wendy Stephenson, our treasurer, and Jen, our acting general manager of the infrastructure. Let me read it again. Acting manager of asset management in the planning, infrastructure, and economic development department. So I think Jen, she hears from me per capita more than she hears from any other councillor. We'll keep that aside, and thank you both, Jen and Wendy, for joining us tonight. I want to say heartfelt thank you to the president who joined us tonight and asked a question. If you leave us tonight and you think of something tomorrow, please feel free to send it to my office, and we can make sure if you need an answer, we'll follow up with staff, or if it's comment to myself, I can use it during the budget deliberation with committee. I can use that. So with that, I want to thank you and have a great evening. Thank you very much. And thank you, Lisa, for controlling the traffic.
Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank you, residents, for your comments.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.